So but now Australia ends. They roll back out. It's time for them to start getting prepared to. They go to New Guinea, and if you remember New Guinea, that's another hard battle was fought there, primarily by the Australians. I don't know if it was primarily, but the Australians definitely fought, because I read that letter from the Australian soldier to his 2-year-old daughter. That's where he died, was in New Guinea. But now New Guinea is owned by the Allies, and they go there to train to start to prepare for their next big push. And here we go back to the book. The truck climbed a series of small hills and finally deposited us in the middle of a field of kunai grass, our new home. This is how the Marines train their men. Keep them mean and nasty like starving beasts, says the Corps, and they will fight better. When men are being moved from one place to another, spare no effort to make it painful, and before they've arrived at their destination, dispatch a man ahead to survey the ground with an eye toward discomfort. So you hear this all the time, that's what the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is going to make you so pissed off, by the time you go into battle, you're just going to kill everybody because you're so sick of living in the dirt. Now, they do a decent amount of training, and now they're preparing to assault another island called New Britain. And I found this very interesting. So back to the book. The commander called us together that night and delivered an eve of battle speech. He spoke in deliberate but angry tones. He spoke like a man who hated the Japanese, as though he had suffered a personal affront at their hands and was bent on personal vengeance. As though this were a personal, not mechanical war. His harangue seemed unreal. It was unreal because it could never produce the desired effect. Kill the Japs, the commander was saying. I want you to kill Japs, and I want you to remember that you're Marines. We've got a tough job where we're going, and where we're going you won't have much room for ammunition, so you'd better be sure you see something before you shoot. Don't squeeze the trigger until you've got meat in your sights, and when you do, spill blood. Spill yeller blood. That was all. We walked back to the tents. It was Christmas Eve. And I find this. It's Christmas Eve. He gets this speech, and you can see, like, he's sitting here just thinking, okay, this guy's trying to get him all riled up, and it's not having any impact. And this is what I found to be the real dichotomy here. At the tents, Father Straight was preparing to say midnight mass. So they have a chaplain there, Catholic chaplain, Father Straight. And here's what he says. Father Straight spoke gently. He reminded us that not all of us would live to see another Christmas, that perhaps some of us might die this very day. He told us to be sorry for our sins, to ask the forgiveness of God, to forgive those who had wronged us, to prepare our souls for death. We sang hymns. 1940-odd years ago, the babe had been born in Bethlehem, and we celebrated him this night in a dark and misty forest that his father had wrought. We sang hymn. We sang hymns to him. Silent night, and hark the herald angels sing. Mild he lays his glory by, born that man no more may die. And tomorrow our hands would be stained with the blood of our brothers. But we sang on, half-heartedly, half-hopingly, sometimes mechanically, sometimes with a desperate driving poignancy. One hand on the heart, the other on the hilt of a bayonet. In the morning, we marched down to the ships. So much more impactful on him was what Father Straight, and much more than the fiery colonel that said we're going to go kill Japs. Here these guys are. I mean, can you imagine you go in for comfort to midnight mass, Christmas Eve, and you get told that many of you may die this very day, and to prepare your soul for death? That's what these guys are facing. That's what the most trusted person in their lives, right? Their spiritual counselor is telling them, prepare for death.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of like what we talk about sometimes, where you get a guy, like if you're watching a video, and it's a guy getting you fired up, he's getting fired up to get you fired up. Sometimes it can work, but a lot of times that won't really work because you kind of feel like he's trying to sell you something.
Yeah.
But then if you hear someone maybe even talking to someone else or talking about something else, and you just kind of extrapolate certain things that get you fired up because it's so authentic.
It's basically the indirect approach on your own mind.
Yeah, on your mind. Yeah.
Yes. Back to the book. On the sunless shores of New Britain, where the rainforest crowded steeply down to the sea, we of the 1st Marine Division came back to the assault, and it was here that we cut the Japanese to pieces, literally, when that devouring jungle did not dissolve them. And it was here that we pitied them. Now, to pity the enemy is either madness or it is a sign of strength. I think that with the 1st Marine Division on New Britain, it was a sign of strength. We pitied him. In the end, this fleeing foe, disorganized, demoralized, crawling on hands and knees even in that dissolving downpour. For in the end, it was we, the soft, effete Americans who had learned to get along in the jungle and who bore up the best beneath the ordeal of the monsoon, and in these things lay our strength. And I'll tell you what I think that boils down to. So what they're saying here is, the Americans, what do people around the world think of the Americans? Even in 1943, Americans are soft. Americans are lazy. Americans, they have too much comfort. And you think the exact opposite of the Japanese, especially in World War II, the Imperial Japanese Army. It was highly disciplined. It was extremely strict. It was a Spartan lifestyle. But look at what happened here, and why is that? And I'll tell you why. In my opinion, I will tell you why. Because you have men that are fighting for freedom. They're fighting for freedom. And that makes all the difference in the world. Fighting for individual freedom, fighting for their personal freedom, and fighting for their nation's freedom, and fighting for their nation's freedom. And it's a nation that is based upon freedom. That right there is stronger than any tyrannical government or any fanatical idea. The idea of freedom is stronger than them all. And that is why these, quote, soft Americans, that is why they were able to conquer and defeat this enemy, this hardened enemy, this well-trained enemy. And this talks a little bit about what we were facing. To the north, one patrol discovered the body of an E Company scout who had been reported missing. The area bore the marks of a struggle as though he had fought hand to hand. His body bore dozens of bayonet wounds. They had used him for bayonet practice. In his mouth, they had stuffed flesh they had cut from his arm. His buddies said he had a tattoo there, the Marine emblem, the fouled anchor, and the globe. The Japs cut it off and stuffed it in his mouth. The commander was angry. Again, to the north, 2 Japanese officers had been caught snooping around our positions and had been killed. An E Company outpost scouting the terrain at their front had discovered a Japanese force in platoon strength, sleeping on the ground, sleeping. They fired into them, into these sleeping supermen of the jungle, withdrawing upon the approach of another enemy platoon. And after the bulk of the battle takes place, and it was fair, it was not a fair fight, and you're about to find out why. Back to the book. 4 Japanese soldiers and 1 officer had been taken alive and had been brought down to the CP, their arms bound behind them, knives at their throats, and from them we learned that the 3rd Company, 53rd Regiment of the Japanese 17th Division had been dispatched from the main body at Cape Gloucester to defend against our landing. Their passage had been through near impenetrable jungle, and they had not arrived on the scene until 2 days after our own coming. Nevertheless, they attacked us. They attacked us, some 100 of them against our force of some 1,200, and, but for the prisoners, we had annihilated them. Were they brave or fanatical? What had they hoped to gain? Had their commander really believed that a company of Japanese soldiers could conquer a battalion of American Marines, experienced, confident, better armed, and placed on higher ground? Why had he not turned around and marched his men home again? Was it because no Japanese soldier can report failure, cannot lose face? I cannot answer. Our dead were 6 men, among them the stubby intrepid Obi, whom I'd last seen in Melbourne, so drunk he could barely stand, whose gun pit had been overrun when the Japs overwhelmed a section of the lines in their first silent rush up the hillside. Obi, who had helped to drive them out in the counterattack, and who had been alternatingly firing and hurling imprecations at them until one of their bullets took him squarely in the forehead. May he rest in peace. The Japanese dead lay in heaps on the hillside, and they filled the trench where Obi's gun had been located. So, that shows the will of the Japanese fighters, no doubt about it. They were hardcore. And they got told to attack with 100 guys against 900 or 1,200. And they said, all right, let's do this. Now, the life, the existence in this jungle was harsh. Back to the book. The puffing of my lips and eyes symbolized the mystery and poison of this terrible island. Mysterious. Perhaps I mean to say New Britain was evil, darkly and secretly evil, a malefactor, an enemy of humankind. An adversary, really, dissolving, corroding, poisoning, chilling, sucking, drenching, coming at a man with its rolling mists, green mold, and ceaseless downpour, tripping him with his numberless roots and vines, poisoning him with green insects and bugs and treacherous tree bark, turning the sun from his bones and cheer from his heart, dissolving him. The rain, the mold, the damp steadily plucking each cell apart like tiny hands tearing at the petals of a flower, dissolving him. I say, into a mindless, formless fluid like the sop of mud into which his feet forever fall in a monotonous slop suck, slop suck. That is the sound of nothingness, the song of the jungle, wherein everything falls apart in hollow harmony with the rain. Nothing could stand against it. A letter home had to be read and reread and memorized, for it fell apart in your pocket in less than a week. A pair of socks lasted no longer. A pack of cigarettes became sodden and worthless unless smoked that day. pocket knife blades rusted together. Watches recorded the period of their own decay. Rain made garbage of the food. Pencils swelled and burst apart. Fountain pens clogged and their points separated. Rifle barrels turned blue with mold and had to be slung upside down to keep out the rain. Bullets stuck together in rifle magazines, and machine gunners had to go over their belts daily, extracting and oiling and reinserting the bullets to prevent them from sticking to the cloth loops. And everything lay damp and sodden and squashy to the touch, exuding that steady, musty reek that is the jungle's own, that individual odor of decay rising from vegetable life so luxuriant, growing so swiftly that it seems to hasten the decomposition from the moment of birth. It was into this green hell that we were inserted a day or two after the march, and here was fought that battle with the rainforest. Here the jungle and the men were locked in conflict, far more basic than our shooting war with the Japanese, for here the struggle was for existence itself. The war was forgotten. Who could comprehend it? Who cared?